so that we may discuss our Lord and Savior Minarchy. No, seriously, I'm just kidding. Hi, my name's Rick Robinson. I am the general manager of KLRNradio.com. We are probably the largest independent podcast network that you've never heard of. We have a little bit of everything, and by that, what I mean to tell you is we have news, pop culture, special events, conspiratainment, true crime, mental health shows, drama productions, and pretty much everything in between. So if you're looking for a new podcast home to grab a little bit of everything that you love all in one place, come check us out. You can find us on X under @KLRNradio. You can find us on our Rumble and our YouTube channels under the same names. You can also find us at KLRNradio.com and pretty much every podcast catcher known to man. So again, feel free to come check us out anytime you like at KLRNradio.
Are you ready to reach for the stars? Tune in to The Lost Wanderer, the #1 monthly podcast on good pods in astronomy. Join our host, Jeff, as he takes you on an interstellar adventure to explore the mysteries of space and the wonders of science. From rocket launches and distant galaxies to the latest discoveries in astronomy, each episode is a thrilling ride through the cosmos. Don't just gaze at the stars, come explore the universe with us. Follow The Lost Wanderer wherever you get your podcasts, and let's discover the stars together.
My dad was really, really special, and I loved my dad a lot.
I'm proud of him, and that even though he isn't here with us, but he died as a true hero.
I miss everything about him.
In the moment that the officers and I had to come see the children, my biggest reaction was, I don't have 7 arms. I have 7 children who just lost their father, and I don't have 7 arms to wrap around them.
I'm Frank Silla, chairman of the Stephen Silla Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Our foundation is committed to delivering mortgage-free homes for Gold Star families and fallen first responder families.
To not have to worry financially is a huge peace of mind. The thought of, what in the world will I possibly do to pay the bills? How will I possibly let the children have a life that feels normal? I don't want them to have to quit their piano lessons or their basketball. I don't want them to feel that we have to move into a little apartment and struggle financially in addition to the emotional weight.
There are over 1,000 families that need our help. Tunnel to Towers is honoring those heroes that risked their lives by providing them with mortgage-free homes.
Those who serve us and then lay down their lives protecting our freedoms and our safety, the least we can do is $11 a month to give them that peace of always knowing there's a home, there's that sanctuary when life feels like it's been tipped upside down, because it has, when you lose a parent in the line of duty, to know you can go home, you can be safe, there's no risk of losing your home. That's a peace of mind that I can't believe you can get for $11 a month.
I'd like to ask you to contribute $11 a month to support their efforts.
Please donate $11 a month by calling 1-844-BRAVEST or visit tunneltotowers.org.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
The following program contains coarse language and adult themes. Listener discretion is advised.
I listen to a lot of true crime. I listen to it at night. I like the girl talk. It makes me feel alright. I like scary stories in the morning, and I like them at night. I like the girl talk vibes. They make me feel just fine. I listen to a lot of true crime.
Hey everybody, welcome to Front Porch Forensics. We are finally back.
We are finally back after December. We was off with some sickness.
The plague hit our house.
Yeah. We died twice, but we're doing better now.
We got better.
We're still fighting some of the effects, a little bit of a cough here and there. So bear with us. We may be clearing our throats a lot or coughing a little bit. But we want to welcome KLRNradio.com friends and family, whether you're listening to us or watching us here on X or on the Facebook or on wherever you're listening to us right now. So, of course, you can catch us on the other apps later on. If you miss some, or if you want to catch some of our old shows, or you missed part of this one, you can always catch back up on us. So, but like I said, it's our first one back. We missed all of December. It was good month. Otherwise, Christmas was good. New Year's was fine.
I say you were sick the day you were sick about Christmas Eve. I got it the day after Christmas. So.
Yeah, I got sick on Christmas Eve, and then we were sick that whole week.
Yeah, you picked it up from church and then decided to bring it home. So
yeah, well, it was Christmas time,
Yeah.
I had to get a gift. I kept giving. Luckily, the tiny tyrant, she stayed healthy throughout all of it, and so that's really can't complain. Other than it is what it is. So we're glad to be back and glad y'all are joining us. So kicking off the year 2025, this will be, I guess, the first episode of 2025
for us. Yeah.
Yeah. For Front Porch Forensics. And we're going to touch on one that I think if you're a fan of this show and you're familiar with what we do and you follow us at all, I think you would take interest in what we do. So I'm confident you'll know what we're talking about today, which is the Stanford prison experiment.
Yeah, a lot of people, I mean, we do have a lot of older listeners, but there have been so many documentaries and movies done about this, and even other psychological studies that were done on this particular topic. And it was between August 15th and August 21st in 1971, and it was conducted by the Stanford psychology professor Philip Zimbardo. And his reasoning was to examine how situational variables can affect people's behaviors and reactions in a simulated prison environment.
Yeah, that's how he sold it, and that's how he presented it. And even to this day, that's how he justifies what it was. But like I said, there's even if you've read up on it or you followed it or you're familiar with it, multiple documentaries about it. There's movies. I know one German-made movie and there's one American-made movie about it. I've only seen the American one, but it was pretty good. Very much Hollywoodized, but still.
It still stayed pretty in line with what happened.
Yeah,
I mean, for the most part, yeah.
Turns out that it's scripted just like the actual experiment was. So
pretty much, yeah.
But there is a documentary we watched on Disney Plus, but it is a National Geographic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
National Geographic documentary called "The Stanford Prison Experiment: Unlocking the Truth." I think it came out this year or right at the end of 2024.
But I can't remember when it came out, but it was a documentary, and they actually brought in some of the men who were assigned as guards, and then some who were assigned as the prisoners.
Yep. It's the first documentary of its size that actually interviewed the participants other than what's his name?
Zimbardo. There were a few others like throughout the years that were, reached out to by, news outlets or whoever, and they have done it. We'll get into one of the guards that went by the nickname of John Wayne. Yeah. Because he was interviewed quite a lot over the years.
Yep.
He's been very, very open about it.
Yeah, he was one of, even in the older documentaries and stuff, they point him out a lot too, one of the guards, for his sadistic behavior and all that.
And we'll get into kind of why he was like that too. But this experiment was set to last for 2 whole weeks, but was terminated after just 6 days. And it was due to the extreme pathological behaviors on the behalf of both the the men assigned as prisoners and the ones assigned as guards. The guards became cruel and sadistic, while the ones who were assigned as prisoners became depressed and hopeless. And I mean, we even had one
subservient, I guess.
Yeah, very, very just timid.
Yeah,
with them almost.
The Anglican Pollock there. He asked the questions as was Zimbardo's basing his work partially off of the work of Stanley Milgram's experiment. And
we actually had somebody else ask us about him today too. So we're going to touch on that one probably in a different episode. But
yeah, well, we'll cover Milgram's experiment too, because it's, I think, an actually more scientifically just study.
A little more ethical and a little more.
Yeah. But yes, Zimbardo did. Milgram's study was before his, of course, so it kind of set the groundwork for these human nature type experiments. So Zimbardo did borrow a lot of his philosophy
or ideas, you know,
off of that study. That was one of the main leading things that got him thinking about it. Zimbardo's real, or maybe his biggest influence on it was, now remember, this is 1971, so Vietnam War going on, the hippie movement, all that, huge anti-war, huge anti-establishment culture. The man was keeping everybody down. So Zimbardo, a big part of his influence, he had an agenda to prove that prisons,
just being in prison, the whole dynamic there between guards and prisoners.
Well, he was always. I mean, he was already to the point that he wanted prisons to be, the prisons was the problem,
right?
Not the prisoners in it. It was the
guards, I think.
The prison itself, the whole establishment, the whole idea of imprisonment was the cause of it, and that prisons were evil places. And prisons actually made people evil, not that evil people were in prison, but the prison actually created the evil.
Yeah, this experiment was trying to prove that, like, I guess human nature or disposition was put at odds with the situation that you're placed in. Like, whether you're in a position of authority or you have to submit to that authority, it's going to change how you, I think, would normally react to something like that. So this was actually described as a kind of Lord of the Flies experiment, but set in a psych lab. Right. And everybody, I think, is familiar with Lord of the Flies. Mm-hmm. Like, you had Piggy, and, you know, they had the shell and everything that you were allowed to talk, and it becomes very, very brutal very quickly.
Right.
And this is what happened in this experiment.
Yeah, he and like I said, that also ties in with some of the Lord of the Flies is just another form of human.
That one was more of a fictional story about what that author saw as natural, like just human nature. That we would automatically kind of devolve into that kind of barbaric attitude.
It's obviously a fictional book, but that's what I say. It's a study of human nature too, in a fictional setting type of way. Because if you look at it, not just this Stanford prison experiment, the Lord of the Flies, all these other ones, human nature is considered to be, given the sinful nature of humans will tend to send people down that path. Yeah. So there is a lot of psychological studies about it, but and good reason, because people are trying to understand why humans left to their own devices normally does go that route. This Zimbardo, though, he kind of manipulated it, in my opinion, too far, which kind of makes it bad science.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time to kind of go into our cut one, because Zimbardo explained in his own words that this environment that he created was designed to actually encourage the behaviors of the guards. Mm-hmm. And he says he kind of justifies this later. Well, only half the guards became like tyrannical and cruel and everything. But this is the longest clip we're going to play, but this is actually Philip Zimbardo himself during the actual like guard orientation and explaining to them how he expects this to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, let me start officially then to, now that you've finished the forms, you've signed the things, and you've begun getting paid. My name is Phil Zimbardo. I'm a professor of psychology here. I got interested in both prisons and the way in which certain situations influence people's behavior. We got interested in prison for a number of reasons. I did work on techniques that the police use to get confessions, psychological techniques since they can't use third degree, and then got involved with some individual prisoners who, at least one of whom has been sentenced to death, and it's clear to me that his confession was coerced and that was the only they had. So I had a personal interest in prison, and also a academic one, is what is the ways in which police use psychology to further their own end. During the course of the term last year, some students of mine were interested in prisons and decided to try to set up a prison. Dave Jaffe, who's going to be the warden in this study, was the one in charge of that. In fact, he set up a prison over a weekend. He'll describe what happened. Nothing as elaborate as this, but some interesting things came out of it. In the course of that, we met an ex-convict, a guy named Carlo Prescott, who had been serving 16 years in prison, who's just out recently. And he taught a course here this summer called The Psychology of Imprisonment, which you may have heard about. Well, through that course, we got interested in what does a prison mean? What does it do to the prisoners? What are all the things that go to creating a prison, setting up a prison? And Prescott made us aware of the fact that a prison is just a physical metaphor for the loss of freedom that all of us feel in different ways, because of our race, because of our sex, because of being poor, because of being middle class, because of being self-conscious. So essentially we're setting up a physical prison here to study what that does. And those are some of the variables that we've discovered occur in prison. Those are some of the psychological variables. And we want to recreate in our prison that psychological environment. There are some things which obviously we can't do. That is, people know that they're going to be there only up to 2 weeks at a maximum. And very often in prison there's long period of time. When California prisons have indeterminate sentence, you can be put in for a year to life, or 5 to life, 1 to 30. So they know it's going to end at 2 weeks. They also know there are some limits to what we can do. There's in real prisons, there are gang rapes, and guys get beaten up and get electroshocked, and sometimes even killed. And they know that there are upper limits to what we can do. Nevertheless, we can create boredom, we can create a sense of frustration, we can create a sense of fear in them to some degree. We can create a notion of arbitrariness, that their life is totally controlled by us, by the system, you, me, Jaffe, that they'll have no privacy at all. Their cells, they're going to be sleeping in rooms with bars on them, that there'll be constant surveillance. Nothing they do will go unobserved. They have no freedom of action. They can do nothing or say nothing that we don't permit. We're going to take away their individuality in various ways. They're going to be wearing uniforms, and at no time will anybody call them by name. Because we won't allow, none of you will, none of we will. We're going to have numbers, and they'll only be called by numbers. And we will insist at least that they do it to each other. If they want to do it privately, then that's one of the things we'll discover. In general, what all this leads to is a sense of powerlessness. That is, we have total power in the situation, and they have none. And the question is, what will they do to try to gain some power, to gain some individuality, to gain some freedom, to gain some privacy, to essentially work against us, to regain some of what they have now, freely moving outside. And we're going to take away whatever freedom, liberty, privacy they have. So essentially that's what we're doing. And Kurt and Craig will describe the kinds of data we will be collecting. I mean, that's the experiment part, is that we're collecting data. Experiment part is that we're collecting data.
Yeah. So when you hear him there talking about, that's a called Day Zero, and it is a training day for the 12 students that are guards.
Yeah, and that was another thing. They had to be Stanford students. And, they actually put an ad in the newspaper saying they get $15 a day for 2 weeks. And, I mean, immediately after that first day that it was published, they got like over 70 applicants, and they chose 24.
Yeah, they $15 a day in 1971 is equivalent to $108 today.
Oh, yeah.
So it was good money for a student, really good money, But so they had 12 guards and 12 prisoners, had 24 total. They broke them up with a flip of a coin to separate them into guards or prisoners, totally at random. Now they had 9 working, and then they had 9 working guards, had 9 working prisoners, and then they had 3 reservists on each side. So one of the guards was sick or missed or had to pull out for any reason. Same thing with the prisoners.
Somebody else could come in and
that
take
somebody
their
could come in.
place.
But this was the Day Zero briefing with the guards on what was expected of them. So in seeing that clip, it seems pretty up and up. Standard stuff. That's kind of what you would expect from a prison guard, is what you can and can't do. But
where it goes wrong is Zimbardo telling them that they're allowed to basically do anything they want to them, short of physically harming them.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the standard rules for a prison guard too, in basic terms.
Nowadays, not so much, but back then maybe so.
Prison guards aren't supposed to actually, become physical unless they are attacked, that kind of thing. So he's laying out the rules of this, and this is that clip comes from the archives from Stanford itself. So
yeah,
those are legitimate archival videos.
Yeah, if anybody wants that link, I'll post it later to my page and everything. But yes, it's Stanford EDU's page on this particular experiment.
And then there's several written archival things too,
they have transcripts and everything,
because the guards had to take notes every day on what they were doing. So to set it up like this, there was 3 cells, and each cell had 3 of the what's it called, prisoners inside each cell. Now, the cells were bigger than a normal prison cell. Those are roughly the size of a bedroom. Your standard like 12 by 14 bedroom or something like that.
They're not huge, but I mean, it could fit 3 people in it. So
yeah, it wasn't an 8 by 8 or 8 by 12. It was a fairly sized room.
I should make note that this all happened like in the basement of Stanford University, in the basement of Jordan Hall, I think it was. And we actually have photos that I'll let Rick kind of cycle through, but here in a minute we'll show that these prisoners and everything, what actually happened was Zimbardo got the local police involved, and it was kind of last minute for them, actually.
Well, I was going to talk about that when we actually got to day 1 part of it. This is the day 0 part.
I said day 1 is the actual arrest.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, day 0 is just him. Like in that clip, he's setting this all up. Like, here's what you're allowed to do. Here's what you're not allowed to do. Here's what we want you to do. Which to me is the big problem.
Well, on the face of it, so far from that clip especially, I don't really find it too disturbing about him laying out the groundwork, because in a real prison, the guards would have power over the prisoners. So that needs to be established up front. But what happens, and it doesn't really show it in this clips, but it comes out in interviews with the actual guards themselves. And there's video recordings in the archives as well from Stanford, but those aren't publicly released. You have to go find them.
I say Rick actually posted a link here in the live chat too for the exhibits.
Okay, perfect. You may be able to search through all that stuff and find some.
There's transcripts.
Right.
I mean, there's all kinds of stuff.
So you'll find out from interviews from them that it was above and beyond what that first clip showed. They were actually told to ramp it up, to get in their faces, to be
more extreme
for a guard, because they were telling the guards, because we got to make it look like a real prison, because prisons are terrible and we got to prove that, is actually one of the things that they were saying.
Yeah.
And to me, that immediately taints the whole thing.
Because, I mean, you hear Philip Zimbardo talking in that introduction about why he got into this and why he wanted to study it was because of what he believed to be a coerced confession of a man on death row.
Right.
I don't think he ever names that particular person or anything, so we don't have any information on that. But that's basically his entire motivation here, was trying to prove that the dynamic between the authorities and the prisoners and everything is so one-sided, basically.
Right. Like I said, there's definitely an agenda from Zimbardo, and the way he was talking with the guards, especially the guards, thought they were in on it, as far as they was just facilitating the experiment.
They didn't think they were actually part of the experiment.
They were facilitating the experiment on the behalf of Zimbardo, because
they wanted to see how prisoners would react.
For that agenda. They were all made aware that the agenda was to prove that prisons were bad, and they wanted to study how the prisoners reacted.
Mm-hmm.
So the guards didn't know they were part of the experiment.
They didn't know that they were going to be actually studied too, and their actions recorded and documented. They were just under the impression that they were instructed to do these things just to get a specific reaction, or to see how the actual, like, quote unquote, prisoners would react to these actions that they were doing.
Yeah.
So they're told to be, cruel, like unnecessarily cruel. Just, they were basically given a green light to do whatever they wanted to do to these boys.
Right.
And they had no idea. That's one of the other ethical implications of this study, because they had no idea that they were actually part of the experiment themselves.
Yeah, they had, like I said, like she was saying, they thought they were doing what they were supposed to do. And in fact, in some of those archives, you'll see a list of the things that the guards were told to do, like make them do push-ups, pull them out at random hours of the night for sleep deprivation, to dehumanize them they took all their clothes, including their underwear, and gave them these. They was just a picture of them wearing these smocks.
Just a plain white smock, just with a number on it. Yep. They all had skull caps.
They took away their names. Gave them numbers. They took away their hair by giving them skull caps, to imitate.
And that's exactly another thing that Zimbardo actually says in that introduction that we just showed. He said, we're going to take away their individuality in various ways. Mm-hmm. You're dehumanizing these people. You're demoralizing them. You're making them almost a homogenous group of just like faceless humans,
right?
Right. Because they're just numbers. They're not actually people. They're just prisoners.
Yeah. And in the 70s, the prison system very well could have been more like that too. Darker places for sure. So it's hard to lay all the blame on Zimbardo as being a bad guy with bad intentions, which I kind of leaned that way. But he was obviously had an agenda, and he used this to push that agenda, which in my opinion makes it bad science.
Yeah.
Even though it's still good to be studied, and it's pretty fascinating with some of the things that these guys went through and the way they reacted, it's just tainted in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we had I think we can go to cut 2 now, because there was actually an interview with.
Let's talk about, you mentioned about him being arrested. So let's just move to day 1 because I liked the way he actually liked this part of it, because
it was very real the way he did it, because they had the men assigned as prisoners had no idea. They were just kind of basically told, okay, well, you need to be at home on this day.
Yeah.
So the local police department gets involved, And Rick has got some of these photos. They were actually put in squad cars, like real life policemen showed up to their homes to actually physically arrest them. And then they were blindfolded at that point and taken to the jail.
The prison, yeah. There you go. Because so what these police, real uniformed officers, showed up at their homes with a camera crew from the local, because they got with the local news sources so they could film it as well, for prosperity reasons and to keep the experiment faithful, is kind of what he was saying.
Right.
But so they come to their home addresses and pulled them out. Not physically pulled them out. They wasn't.
But they came up to the door like, hey, you're under arrest. And they were told to make up some vague reason, like drug charges or something.
Mostly drug charges. But they pulled them out in the streets in front of all their neighbors, frisked them on the side of the car, handcuffed them, cuffed and stuffed, as they say, put them in the back of the car.
It was like a genuine arrest at this point.
At that point, they turned the sirens and the lights on and left. And they didn't explain anything to the neighbors, nothing. It looked and acted and felt like a real arrest.
Completely real, yeah. And it never really says why they were blindfolded, but I think it was just so that they didn't know that they were going to Stanford University.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Because it was a basement room in Jordan Hall that they were taken to.
Yeah,
these were students of Stanford.
Yeah,
so
he wanted to take any familiarity away from it. Once they got arrested, they blindfolded them so they couldn't see where they're going. So the next time they open their eyes and can see, they're in prison.
They're already in their cell or something. Or they're about to be deloused, like stripped down, deloused, like you would do in a real prison.
When they arrive, they're in the intake chamber, which is just a room to the side. That's when they're walked in, down a hallway, blindfolded, into the, what did I just call it?
Intake chamber,
intake room, whatever, where the blindfold is removed. They have people in guard uniforms. They actually take anything they had in their pockets, all their belongings away from them, any belts, all that kind of stuff, took their shoes at that point, and done had the police with them, actually done fingerprints, legitimate fingerprints.
And they had like the real delousing powder, which apparently stings and burns.
It's a spray. It was a spray form.
Yeah.
But they took and stripped them down, deloused them with the spray. It may have just been Lysol. I don't know what they used, but a spray. Put the sock cap on their head to simulate baldness. Gave them the schmuck with just a prison number on it. No name, just a number on it.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a shapeless frock type thing. You can see it in that photo right there. That's what they had.
And then they also put a chain around their right ankle, complete with a lock. Just a small length of chain that wrapped 3 or 4 times around their ankle, and then they locked it with a padlock, basically. So,
well, they also actually, some of the inmates were chained together. They would take
when they would bring them out to the hallway sometimes.
But day one also was really interesting, because that's when I think the prisoners were the bravest, and they tried to fight back against everything and whatnot.
Yeah, at this point, it's pretty interesting because everybody, everybody looked at this as a job. They was getting paid to do this. The prisoners, now the guards had their day zero training. Well, the prisoners also were told when they first signed up for it that they had the freedom to leave and walk out.
If it became too much, they could say, hey, I'm done. I want out.
Yeah, they had the freedom to leave the experiment. Well, once they got in and detained and put into the system, so to speak,
and incarcerated,
they were told that the only way they could get out they told them they couldn't get out, but the only way they could get out was for medical reason, whether it be physical or mental. So that's the only 2 ways you can leave is medical or mental emergency.
Distress, yeah.
So they had already changed it on them then.
Yeah.
Again, up front, they was not told about the chain on their foot. They was not told about the smock, the prison numbers. They wasn't warned of any of that stuff.
They were not told that they were going to be there 24/7. They were not permitted to go home. Like, there was no break in this whatsoever.
There was no phone calls. There was no, once they got put into their cells, there was no leaving contact with the outside world at all. Now, the guards, they worked in 3 shifts, 3 8-hour shifts. So they actually got to go home and kind of get back with their families and stuff, which prison guards do that.
Right.
So, I mean, that kind of jobs, you know.
But that was one of the unethical things that was already happening, because they told the prisoners something different than actually happened.
Yeah. And that's according to some of the participants' interviews after the fact, is that they was told that the plan got switched on.
Now, in day one, this is when we see them have a little bit of rebellion.
Well, in day one, they're kind of testing their limits. The guards are everybody's kind of laughing, almost taking it lightly at this point. The prisoners are talking back, being rude, because they know, according to the rules, that they can't be harmed. They can't be physically touched or physically handled. They can't be any real danger. So they was kind of testing their limits, running their mouths, being smart alecks, especially this one in particular was.
And there's actually one of the archive videos and everything of some of these prisoners kind of, not really taking it seriously. They're laughing, they're joking around and everything. And you kind of see the shift then, because there are certain guards that are like, you're not allowed to laugh at us. Like, you're not allowed to do this.
Yeah.
So we see them actually start to take that bit of control then.
There's one in particular, they nicknamed him John Wayne, because, again, this was right during the Vietnam War. Everyone involved in this study, basically everyone in Stanford, was anti-war. And John Wayne came out pretty famously and was pro-soldier. And they took it as him being pro the war. And therefore, he was the bad guy because he was pro-war. So everything, John Wayne took on the identity of being the man to these guys.
Well,
so therefore, he was a symbol of everything that they hated.
He also used the movie Cool Hand Luke as his inspiration.
So this guard that was nicknamed John Wayne decided he was going to take that step and be in control of it all. And he was going to play the character of, I can't remember the guy's name, but the guard in the warden guard there in Cool Hand Luke that had come out in 1967. So
what we have here is a failure to communicate.
That's right. Or he says, I could be a real nice guy, but I could be a real son of a bitch.
Yeah.
That guy. But yeah, that was the character that his real name was, I almost said Dale or something.
I can't remember. It may show up in cut too, because that's actually an interview.
Struther Martin. There you go.
Yeah.
That's him.
I say we have this interview now. It's a shorter clip than the first one. But it actually interviews Zimbardo talking about it, but it interviews the John Wayne guard too.
Oh, that's cut too? Okay. Yeah. Perfect.
On the first day, I said, this is not going to work. I mean, the guards felt awkward giving orders, and they'd say, okay, line up, repeat your numbers, and the prisoners would start giggling.
I don't want anybody laughing. 3, 2, 1.
And then a very interesting thing happened. Dave Eshelman, who the prisoners named John Wayne, like he's a Wild West cowboy, he begins to be more extreme.
I decided that I would become the worst, most intimidating, cruel prison guard that I could possibly be.
I want you to see in the future that you do work when you're told. Say it again. Say bless you, correction officer.
I was sort of fascinated myself that people were believing the act, and I was trying to see how far I could take it before somebody would say, okay, that's enough, stop.
We did have to do things like push-ups. We would have to sing things. At the beginning, we protested some of the actions. We did things to irritate the guards.
If I gotta be in here, I'm not gonna put up with any of your shit.
So the guards' authority was challenged right off the bat. And the guards had to decide how they were going to handle that, and they had to decide it without our input. I mean, again, this was not a Milgram study in which we were standing over them telling them what to do. And they began to see the prisoners' behavior as a kind of an affront to their authority, and they began to push back.
We would ramp up the general harassment, just sort of crank it up a bit. Nobody was telling me I shouldn't be doing this. The professor is the authority here. You know, he's the prison warden. He's not stopping me.
This is unbelievable. They took our clothes. Hands off the door.
There was the first evening a kind of rebellion that took place.
The prisoners rebelled. They barricaded themselves in their cells and said, we refuse to come out. They took off their numbers. They didn't want to be de-individuated. They started cursing the guards to their face. And the key turning point was the guards began to think of them as dangerous prisoners.
Yeah, so again, that it plays, the science of it sounds pretty interesting and pretty legit until you find out that, because Zimbardo saying that the guards was doing this, the guards was doing this, but in other interviews, the guards was actually this Dave here actually saying that he never told me to do more, but he kept saying, you're doing great. Hey, you're fantastic. You look really good out there today. And then he was telling the other guards who was kind of laid back and reserved that they needed to show the prisoners that the guards are a unit together, and that they needed to start stepping it up and being more like John Wayne was. So sure, maybe he didn't tell John Wayne to do or to stop. It certainly didn't do that. And he may not have told him to do more, but by congratulating him and giving him all this praise,
That's encouragement.
and then encouraging the other ones to be more like him. Well, yeah, that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
He may not have used those words, but it's 100% what he's doing.
Well, I mean, you hear the guy, the John Wayne guard, you hear him saying, nobody told me to stop.
Yeah.
And that to me is so telling.
Yeah. And
because he was like, okay, yes, I'm getting more and more extreme, but nobody's saying I've crossed the line yet.
So again, that human nature part, so he's going to see how much further he can push it.
And that's exactly what he was saying there too.
Yeah. So the one guy, and I think his number was 816 or 8612 or something. I'll look it up here in a minute. Anyways, that one guy who was kind of leading the rebellion, he had his hands on the door there. You saw him, and he was saying, you know, hey, you took our beds, you took our clothes, that kind of stuff.
Well, okay, actually, I have an interesting point there. You know why they took their beds?
Yeah.
Because on day one, like the prisoners were actually using their mattresses to barricade the doors.
Yeah.
So the guards couldn't get in, couldn't see them.
Yeah. So what they were doing, the guards would come in, and to wake them up, they would pull them all out into the hallway, and they'd make them do jumping jacks or push-ups or sit-ups. They was just basically harassing them constantly.
There was another one that I thought was just absolutely awful. They pull these boys out into the corridor, make them line up against the walls, and they tell them, let's see how well you've all learned your numbers. And they're supposed to, like, one by one, rattle off their prisoner number. I'm, 8612, Mr. Correctional Officer. Because that's the only way they were allowed to refer to the guards was as Mr. Correctional Officer. And they would be punished if they didn't do it.
Well, that actually comes up after this, because once the prisoners started their rebellions and that kind of stuff, that's when the guards started pushing even harder. Once they
were going to squash that rebellion.
Once they done the beds against the doors, so the guards couldn't, because the doors of these cells opened inward. Bad design. And so they put the bed frames.
This wasn't actually a prison. This is just the basement of one of the halls at Stanford University. So
they put the beds and everything in there in a way that you couldn't open the door.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the guards eventually do get them out. And at that point, they take their beds completely. They take the bedding, the pillows, the sheets. They take their smock. So now they're all butt naked.
Yep.
And then they, of course, the prisoners at this point are legitimately mad and thinking at this point that the guards are terrible people. And the guards, like Zimbardo was saying, is realizing now that these prisoners are starting to ramp it up and take it to a new level. We're the ones in control, and you're going to do what we say because that's the rules that they were given. So, of course, now they're going to start ramping up as well. And you'll see that it gets progressively worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, keep in mind, this was originally supposed to last for 2 weeks, but it was terminated after only 6 days.
Yeah.
Because of the extreme behavior from both the prisoners and the guards.
Yeah, all that rebellion started day one. I mean, it started within a few hours, and it started immediately. I think the day started, they got them checked in on day one by 10 a.m. And by that afternoon, they had already got into this. So I'm just talking about a few hours, they'd already started this whole.
And I mean, speaking of just how the behavior and everything is ramping up, we had one of the boys as the prisoner. There were 5 total that had like emotional breakdowns, like actual breakdowns.
Yeah, different levels.
And one happened after only 36 hours. He was only in there for 36 hours when he had an emotional breakdown, and they still would not permit him to leave. Like, he still had to stay.
Yeah, that was the one who was leading the rebellion. He realized, now we'll tell this first, and then I'll tell what his side of the story is. But he's famously known for being the screaming guy, the screaming boy from the prison.
I say locked in solitary and just coming apart.
Across the hallway from the prison cells was basically a utility closet that they was using for the hole, being solitary confinement. And this guy had already been in the hole a couple of times. And he, like I said, he was just very, very anti-establishment guy. And
anti-authority, basically.
Anti-authoritarian.
He was going to resist no matter what.
Yeah, and that was just his nature. And he was realizing that this job was becoming bad, that this was a bad job, and he wanted out. Because this was the night of the first day. He was told that he could bring books, and his idea was he's going to read books and just go through the.
I say he was just going to do his 2 weeks and be done, collect his paycheck.
Yeah. But then he realized that they lied to us about a few things already, and now they're saying I can't have my books. And so, of course, he realized now that this is a bad job. I don't want to be here. I'm ready to go home.
This dynamic has changed drastically.
And he tells them so. He's like, I'm ready to go home. I want to leave. And they say, no, he can't go. We're not going to let you go. So they later on, he fakes a tummy ache. He tells them, hey, I got to go. My stomach's bothering me. I got to get out of here. It's so bad. I need to go see a doctor. Well, they pull him in the back, and they're talking to him about it because one of the things to leave is physical or mental distress.
Basically.
So he says, I'll go physical distress. My stomach's bothering me. I don't know if it's the food, the stress, whatever it is, but his tummy ached to the point that he needed a doctor, so he needed to leave the program, the experiment. Well, they talked to him, says that we can't let you go because you're too pivotal to the experiment. You are the leader of the rebellion. You are the leader of the prisoners. You're too important for the experiment.
Too valuable to the study.
Too valuable to the study. So they did not want to let him go, and basically told him at that point, you can't leave. So now they send him back to the hallway to his prison cell. And when they bring him back in, they've already got all the other inmates up against the wall outside. And the first thing he does when they bring him in the door is he announces to other prisoners, they're not going to let us go home. They won't let us leave. So they put him back in their cells. He decides that, okay, if they're not going to let us leave, we're going to escape. So they put them back into cells, and of course they're continuing to fight, or not fight, but they're continuing to be.
These are the two guys that tried to get down the hallway, right? Because they were actually shackled together.
Yeah. So they're continuing to push it. They realize, well, they're not going to let us leave, so they're going to ramp it up even more with their fighting and all that stuff. So he gets put in the hole for a little while. They bring him back out. I don't remember exactly what they do for this point, but they wind up getting their smock taken away again. So now they're all naked again.
And we're talking like buck naked.
Yeah,
like
no
nothing,
underwear, nothing.
no stitch of clothing except for that skull cap.
Yeah. So
Stick around.
So they would keep reaching through the bars, grabbing at the door handles, trying to get out. They was grabbing at the guards as they come by, just being real ruckuses. So they chained them together at this point. The chains around their legs, they chained them up together in pairs of 2 inside the cells. So this one guy who was the leader, had found out that there was electrical outlets inside the cell because, like I said, it's just a converted room.
Mm-hmm.
And he got the screw out of it, and it was a flathead screw. And the lock mechanism on the door, the way it was put on, the screws were flathead as well on the inside. So he used that bolt or screw as a screwdriver and took the door latch apart while the guards wasn't paying attention. And then once the guards left, I guess for a shift change or whatever, to eat their supper or whatever, they pushed the door open and was trying to escape. Well, it's a hallway. There's no way to get out, really. And as the guards come back, they find them basically just roaming up and down the hallway together.
And again, to keep in mind, these are buck naked guys that, like, if me and Daniel are sitting here, like, his right leg is now like chained to my left leg. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to, walk and get out in some way.
And there's a video in the archives for Stanford on this, and they're actually laughing about it because they still kind of almost a game for them,
I mean, maybe at this point they still kind of saw it as like a test, maybe like, yes, a game, like, let's see if we can get out of here. Yeah. Like, let's see if we can do it despite being chained together, despite being naked. Like,
well, one of the rules that they were given were, the guard says they couldn't escape. Well, in the prisoner's minds, hey, we escaped. Our game's over.
Right.
So the guards come back in, they grab them, throw them back into cell, find out that 8612, whatever his number was, the screaming boy was the one behind it. So, of course, they started in on him pretty hard as far as verbally getting on him.
They decided they were going to break him.
Yeah, they decided they was going to break him at that point. Well, he's fighting back with them. I mean, he's right back in their faces, too. So they take him up, throw him in the hole, and shut the door. And they can actually lock that door, so he couldn't get out of there. They did give his smock back, so he was dressed at that point. And so he's sitting in there, and he realizes at this point that, hey, I really can't get out of here. I have played the game correctly. I have,
at least as far as he was informed anyway, that
I have come up with the physical excuse to go home, and they denied that. They lied about me able to have books, therefore, and they've lied about me being able to go home on those terms. What else are they lying about here? I have to get out of here because this is not right. It's time for me to go. Something's wrong. Now, Zimbardo and the general the general belief on this is that he actually has a mental breakdown. The video that goes along with it. Do we have that clip?
I don't have that one.
The video that goes along with it.
Maybe that was on the Disney thing, so we couldn't use it.
The video that goes along with it, I'm sure you can find it. If you look up just the Stanford Prison Experiment, the Screaming Boy, or...
Oh, yeah, there's tons of stuff.
Yeah. It sounds horrible. I mean, it's disturbing to hear.
If he was acting, that is a phenomenal act.
So, of course, they consider it a mental breakdown, so they pull him from the hole, take him up to the Dr. Zimbardo, and they do the interview on it. Zimbardo is in agreement that he is emotionally broken at this point. They had a mental breakdown.
I mean, he even in interviews and everything afterwards was talking about he had an emotional breakdown.
Yeah. So they agreed to let this guy go home and come out of the study. So they call the guy's girlfriend. She comes, gets him, and he leaves. So he's out of the study after 36 hours.
I say we're a day and a half into this.
Yeah.
That's it.
So this is actually a huge selling point for Zimbardo, because again, his agenda is to prove that prisons can take good people and turn them evil or break them.
And it's cruel to the inmates.
Yeah, it's cruel to the inmates. And so here you go, within 36 hours of relatively benign torture, this guy has a mental breakdown to this level. So, of course, that is actually right up his alley. This is exactly what he wanted to see.
I would say that was more harassment at that point, because the torture, actually, the psychological torture started to come after that, and like day 2 and into day 6.
It just depends on what level of what you want to call it. But
yeah,
to me, yeah, I mean that's locker room stuff. What was going on, aggravating each other. So pretty benign, especially for what's coming up. But he, so I think that Zimbardo, from the interviews I've seen and what other people are saying, I think he was actually happy and was ready to accept that this guy had a mental breakdown, because it's what he wanted to see. It fit his narrative.
And that would probably explain, too, why in every interview after that, he talked about him having an emotional breakdown. Because if he said, oh, well, he pretended to have an emotional breakdown to get out of it, it did not prove his hypothesis.
Right. And the prisoner that had the breakdown, the screaming boy, he maintains that it was fake, that he was acting so that he could get out, because he knew the tummy ache, the physical ailment wasn't enough to get him to leave. So he went the mental route and pretended and acted it out so that he could go home, because he knew, hey, it wasn't what
interesting to see.
It wasn't what I signed up for. So he was ready to go home.
It would have been really interesting to see if they hadn't let him go home even then. Like, even if it was an act, like, who's to say that it wouldn't have been real at some other point?
Yeah.
You know?
If they actually could have broken. But I think it happening so early, again, is something that Zimbardo just loved. He loved the idea that it broke him so soon.
Again, that was evidence. Like, he was trying to create a situation that proved his hypothesis. He was telling these, the ones assigned as guards, he was literally telling them to be as extreme as they could within these set parameters, that they couldn't, like, physically harm anybody or,
right,
do anything like that. They couldn't hurt anybody.
Yeah, these guards had full uniforms, sunglasses, so they couldn't.
The mirrored sunglasses.
Yeah, so that made the guards kind of what would be less human to the prisoners.
That, and you see this picture right here, they would put paper bags over their heads to further take away that individuality.
Yeah.
They took away their face. I mean,
and you see there, the guard also had a nightstick too. So he had, quote unquote, a weapon. And so obviously he could use the nightstick. He just couldn't hit you with it.
But I say they did use him to, like, bang on the walls and doors and, crap like
they
that.
They would take and kind of poke them with it or move them around with it, but they couldn't actually strike them with it. So, but that's not a part of their authority, tools of their authority, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they tried to make it, I mean, at least for the guards, as real as possible. I mean, prisoners, even back in the 70s, they got more than just a smock and a skull cap and flip-flops, Like, you get more than that. You get underwear. You get your bedding. You get your sheets. You get clothes. I mean, even in the 70s, like, say what you will about, prisons back then maybe, or even now, but prisoners are treated so much better than they were treated. Like, what they did in this experiment would never fly, even in the 70s.
Right.
Like, it would have been like this huge big deal if it was actually happening in prisons. It would have been considered cruel and unusual punishment, which is constitutionally illegal.
Right. The Yeah, he said that the reason they wouldn't let the guards go to that level, and Zimbardo was actually kind of sad about this almost in a way, or frustrated, I guess, is because he wanted to, in his words, replicate a true prison, which involves rape and torture and physical violence, even up to murder.
Death, yeah.
And he was actually disappointed because they couldn't go to that
He
level.
said, we can't fully simulate this environment.
Right. But they want to get as close as they can. So, and the things that come up later, they start simulating some things too that you might see in a prison, I guess, to more accurately, simulate what they believed or what he wanted to portray that a prison life would be like for a prisoner.
Yeah, they very, very much tested the boundaries of what they were allowed to do, like ethically, and we're going to get into the ethics of all the rest of this later, but what Zimbardo put as the limits ethically were so far beyond what any kind of psychological experiment would be permitted today.
Yeah. And so now we've got the first prisoner has left, and now they're down a prisoner. So they call in one of the three reserves
backup,
and bring him in. And this guy is a merchant marine. He had lived on a ship, and all that kind of stuff. So he had now, of course, this isn't like actual military type level of stuff, but he had a regimen that he had to follow, and that a much more, what's the word? A much more, he had things he had to do every day. Regimented. Yeah, regimented. Thank you.
Yeah.
Regimented type of lifestyle than the other prisoners did, because these were the students as well. They had never really experienced that. But this guy, been in the Merchant Marines, he actually had people telling him what to do. Okay, now it's time to eat type situation, where the other guys, they didn't really have that.
Very, very structured for him.
Right. So when he comes in to replace, he gets given the same number that the previous participant had.
Which I think also goes back to stripping them of their individuality. Like, you're not even a new person. We're just going to replace that prisoner with you.
Yeah. So, but this guy, he didn't get arrested. He actually showed up, and he said he come into the program, walked into the hallway, got to the intake room, and no one was actually there when he arrived. So he just sat and waited. And all of a sudden, these guards come in, and immediately they start yelling at him, stand him up, do the fingerprint thing, and strip him down and delouse him right there in that intake room.
So they didn't react differently to it being a completely new person.
Mm-mm.
They reacted the same way as they, up to this point, were already behaving.
Yeah, there was
like just immediate.
Yeah, there was no soft opening with this guy. It was immediate. You're in it. So they put him into the hallway. They treat him exactly like they would the other prisoners, except this guy, even though he had the same number as the previous participant, he had a different attitude. Now, whereas the others had a few days to kind of, by this time it had been 48 hours into it, so a little over 2 days.
Let's say we're about maybe 2.5 days in.
So he arrives. He's had no time to assimilate at all. He's just immediately in it. And in his interviews later, he actually talks about how he could already tell some of the other prisoners were subdued. They was already kind of falling into the routine, what the guards had set up. And
like, just go along with it. Don't make waves.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it gets worse for us if we,
yeah,
fight it or anything.
Yeah, when their leader had his mental breakdown, because what they saw was, whether it be an act or not, they saw this guy have a mental breakdown and then he just was gone. He disappeared. No explanation.
Yeah.
So in the prisoner's mind, they see that their friend, their buddy, I don't know how friendly they were, but their peer.
It was their version of the leader. Like we
Yeah.
had John Wayne on the side of the guards that was kind of the leader there.
Mhm.
But then you had this prisoner who was that counterpoint. And now
Yeah.
that counterpoint and everything, that's completely gone.
Yeah, just gone. And now this new guy comes in with a completely different attitude. So now they're just kind of, you can see at that point is the turning point for the prisoners because they start.
It's very demoralizing.
Oh yeah, that the fight is kind of gone at this point with those. Well, that type of fight, anyways. That there is some resistance, which I think is pretty cool. But it's again bad science, but it's very interesting to me to see how the prisoners react now. Because
which was the entire goal really of the experiment to begin with, was how prisoners would react. It was about compliance with authority, how all these dynamic works in a prison situation. So it really is focused more on how the prisoners react, not necessarily how the guards react, because you have to remember, guys, our guards in this situation are instructed to be as cruel as within the rules allowed them to be.
Yeah. So this new guy comes in and he's very much a pacifist. So definitely different attitude than the original. And so these prisoners are kind of falling in line at this point. It's actually affecting them pretty hard. Now, the guards.
Look, in wartime, you lose your leader, your general, whoever is in charge. That takes a very massive, emotional, psychological toll on you. Because now the person that you thought was going to help you get out of this situation, they're gone.
Right.
And I mean, what do you do in that situation?
Mm-hmm.
Do you step up and become try to take their place, try to become a new leader? Or do you just say it's easier to go along with it?
Right. Yeah, because at this point, they're realizing that there is consequences to their actions. So now, again, these 9 prisoners, they're there from the time they were arrested. They haven't left this hallway.
Yeah, they've been in there for what? We're talking maybe
over
48 hours.
Over 48 hours at this point.
Yeah.
And they had no contact with anyone other than, on the outside.
Other than the guards.
Yeah, they're realizing now that, hey, this is kind of starting to set in. Hey, this is a lot more real than we thought. And they're starting, and the guy who was their leader, the outspoken one, the one who was fighting back, well, he disappeared. They broke him and he's gone. So that's a mental hit.
Yeah, I mean,
like you were saying,
this is the leader, and they broke the leader. So what does that say about us?
Yep.
That's what that mentality is probably happening right there.
Mm-hmm. So by this time, now the guards, there was 9 guards, but there was only 3 to 4 per shift. They got to go home and they got breaks. So the prisoners, they got to see this rotation of these other students. And they got to leave, and we don't. So that's just another driving home force that we really are.
They're working in shifts. We are not. We actually are prisoners at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, all intents and purposes, they are.
Yeah, 100%.
So this new guy, his name is Clay. His name's Clay. I remember that. You got Dave, who is John Wayne, the main.
He's our leader.
He's
of
our
the
leader.
Guards.
Now, each shift had a version of John Wayne, but not near to that level. Dave's John Wayne was obviously the main lead and the biggest impact on the way the other guards acted and carried themselves. And now you got Clay, this new guy coming in, and again, he's a pacifist, and he's kind of almost been there, done that type of situation by being in the Merchant Marines. He's done some traveling, and he's had people telling him things that
I mean, for the most part, the military, when you're in it, they kind of do control almost everything, especially like if you're active duty, you're living on a base, and
it's not
like everything is very regimented, very scheduled.
Well, so it's not like the military type. It's not near that level, but there is some stuff you got to follow.
But I mean, there was that basis, there was that ground floor that he was able to, like, okay, like, I understand this.
He's experienced someone else telling him what to do. Well, he actually says in one of his interviews later that a lot of the other prisoners, they would tell him, hey, it's only 2 weeks. We just keep our head down, get through it, and it's over with. It's good money. But he realizes after just a few hours into that first day that this is ridiculous. You know, what these guards are doing is stupid. There's no sense to this. And he said, his quote was, I'm not it's just 2 weeks kind of guy. He's like, my time in my life is worth more than that. And he realized real quick that he had made a mistake by signing into this.
I mean, some of the things that the guards were doing were things like they would randomly pull you out of the cell and they would make you sing like nursery rhymes to them just until they said stop.
Oh, yeah.
This could go on for hours at a time.
Yeah, they had them come out in groups, or all of them, and put them up against the wall, and they would have to state their name or state their numbers in order over and over and over, faster and faster and faster. The guards would have them sing their numbers in some ridiculous way. They would have them all hold hands and do Ring Around the Rosie or whatever that's called.
Anything that they could use to humiliate them, just almost infantilize them in a way.
And
there was the sheet incident where each prisoner had to say if they would keep their sheet or give up their sheet.
Well, we'll get to that. There's a reason why they do that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they was making all these ridiculous, dumb games, which was just very childish.
It was meant to infantilize them, to humiliate them.
And some of the guards, again, there was 9 guards. They was all rotating out. Some of the guards had real problems with this. They thought, well, this is, I don't enjoy doing this. I don't want to be a guard anymore. And one of the guards was kind of a very laid back kind of guy. He actually said that the reason he signed up is because he was almost arrested for hash, the drug, possession. And it made him think, what would life be like if I had been put in jail? And then immediately he sees this ad in the newspaper. So I thought, hey, that's a great idea. I can learn.
Right.
So he goes in hoping to be a prisoner and even requests it. But after the fact, he goes in hoping to be a prisoner, and he winds up being a guard, and he actually requests to be a prisoner, and they say, no, it's random. You have to be a guard.
Right.
Well, he was identifying with the prisoners better, and he said, he had studied abroad in Europe, and at the time you could walk around on campuses in Europe smoking pot openly, and nobody cared. It was fine. It was normal. So while he was in Stanford in that basement, he was smoking.
Yeah.
And a lot of the others were smoking regular cigarettes, on camera at least. So he was actually sharing with the prisoners too, and they cut all that out. So you can't do that. So, but he said, every time I lit up one, I wanted to share it with the prisoners because they was just another guys too.
He related to the prisoners then. And like he was trying, I guess, to humanize them in a way that was taken away from them.
Which again, unprovoked, that was his natural reaction. That's good science.
That was his normal disposition.
That should have been good science with this study.
Yeah.
But what happens is the warden, Zimbardo, and I think there was 3 other people that was kind of running it.
Yeah.
They pull him to the side and says that he's not playing along correctly, that he has to step it up and be tougher with the prisoners like the other guards are doing, because that's the way it has to be.
Yeah, and we're a little over an hour into this, so if anybody's just joining, we showed a clip earlier of Zimbardo like laying out how he in the guard orientation, he lays out what he expects from the guards, and they are supposed to be cruel. They're supposed to dehumanize, demoralize, like strip away the individuality from these people in however manner they deem fit. Like all of these torture methods that we were describing, like making them sing nursery rhymes or play Ring Around the Rosie, the guards came up with that entirely on their own.
Right. What they could do, they couldn't do anything They couldn't do anything to physically harm the prisoners. But what they were encouraged to do was to cause fear and boredom.
Frustration.
Yeah.
Like they actually had on a blackboard like a whole list of things, like the sense of powerlessness, the sense of hopelessness.
They wanted to
dehumanize.
Yeah. They wanted to do that too. And I mean, those were the goals, basically. Those are the rules that were set out. So if they tell you you're supposed to do that, then that's what you're going to do.
Yeah. And again, these people were instructed to do this. So this is where we get into the bad science of this experiment.
Yeah,
because it was originally intended to be an experiment about like a natural disposition that a person has in a specific situation. So we get that guard that is trying to, kind of make things easier on the prisoner and, tell him I still recognize you as a person, basically. Like that is his natural disposition in even a position of authority like that. That should have been what was studied is if you put regular people into these positions, how do they react naturally to this power dynamic? But this experiment did not do that. Again, they were instructed, the guards in the position of power were instructed to actually abuse that power. And we even get the John Wayne guy in clip 2 that we showed saying, I was just pushing boundaries. They never told me to stop. I just was doing what I was told to do.
Yeah, the whole thing, they never told me to stop.
They never said what I was doing was too much or too far.
Like when we showed that clip, I was mentioning that they was actually encouraging them and congratulating them and praising them for the things they were doing.
Yeah. I mean, that encourages their increasingly extreme behavior.
And then the guards who are being more lenient and all that, they was actually being chastised and told to do more.
Yeah, there were about half of the guards, they said, that were not like tyrannical or just cruel for cruelness sake. There were about half of them. So about 6 guards?
Yeah, there was 12 guards on rotation.
Yeah,
so
12
around
and 12.
6.
So half of them would be 6. So roughly 6 guards were not going along with this, and they were actually chastised for it.
Oh. Sorry, that was a loud one. I had to mute. Yeah, again, that's where the science started really getting, in my opinion, ruined because, but it's still
not a natural, just observation of human nature. It was just it was completely planned and scripted, and
but still the interesting thing too that kind of makes it an interesting study, even though it's flawed, is that these guards could have said no. These guards could have pushed back against John Wayne, but none of them did. They slowly began to increase to match him.
And you also see the inverse thing happening with the prisoners. You see more and more of them just going along with whatever is being demanded of them.
Yeah.
They're just, it's a blind obedience at this point.
Yeah. And you'll see, we'll get into it now. So we got Clay, the replacement prisoner. He shows up, pacifist kind of guy. He realizes real quick that, hey, this is a mistake. He hears stories about the mental breakdown and the punishments that they've been given and all this kind of stuff. So he thinks, how can I fight back? So he comes up with a hunger strike. He decides he's going to go on a hunger strike. And eventually, because he's not eating, they'll eventually cut him loose and send him home too.
So that would get into, it would affect his health after a few days at least.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume he's still drinking water at this time. It just says a hunger strike. But
yeah, he's refusing to eat his food. Yeah.
Yeah, but I assume he's still hydrating at least.
Oh, he'd have to be. So
yeah, because I mean that gets into after only 3 days, just about is like the human tolerance on average.
So he's very, very silent. He don't speak. He doesn't raise any kind of fuss. He just refuses to eat. The first time this happens, the guards kind of realize they don't really know what to do. They threaten him a few times, but they don't really know how to handle it because
They
how do
can't
you
physically force him to?
how do you break a hunger strike?
I say without actual physical force that they were already just excluded from doing. They are not permitted to do anything that would physically harm one of the prisoners.
So the next meal was the following day, and he does it again. He won't speak to them. He won't participate other than what he's forced to participate by chanting the names, standing out in the hall with his other prisoners, those kind of things. But as far as communication, he's very silent. But again, he won't eat his food, and I think it happens to be hot dog day or something.
Oh yeah, that's really bad.
And at this point, John Wayne was back, Dave, and he decides that he's going to be the one who intimidates him and
tries to break him.
Tries to break him. So he's telling him to eat the hot dog, his sausages, and he won't do it. He says, if you don't eat these sausages, you know what I'm going to do with them? I'm going to take them and cram them right up your ass,
Like that's actually a literal quote. He literally uses words, cram it up your ass.
Yeah, so he's threatening to do physical harm to him. I mean, he's got his hands on him and stuff, not choking him or nothing, but the intimidation thing.
Him.
Yeah, the intimidation of, I have the power over you, hand on your shoulder type thing. Because at this point, Clay is sitting down at the table and John Wayne's standing up over
him. Yeah, it's a very imposing physical situation to be in.
And he won't eat it. So again, the guards at this point are starting to ramp up with their anger and their threats because he's
still refusing at this point. Like he's not caving.
This guy is leading a different kind of rebellion that they don't know how to handle. So
well, that they're not allowed to handle probably the way that at this point they wanted to handle it.
That they're not allowed to handle in any kind of physical way.
Yeah.
So they don't know what to do. So they take him and put him in the hole, in that little closet. And this guy is much bigger than the first prisoner. He actually says that when he was in the hole, he couldn't stretch out all the way, that closet. Said he almost could, but he couldn't quite stretch out.
Yeah, I mean, the closet or the hole was a much smaller than like the rooms that they had them in as cells.
Oh, yeah. It's like I said, like a small.
Like I think our bedroom closet is probably bigger than what he had.
I mean, it's just like a utility closet you see in any kind of building. Real not like utility closet with hot water heaters. It's like where you put your brooms and your mop bucket and stuff like that.
It's like that tiny little pantry almost.
Yeah.
Like.
Well, they said he couldn't stretch out in it, so I imagine less than 6 foot long.
Yeah.
And then maybe 3 foot deep at the most, I would assume. Either way, small. And he spends several hours in there, and the whole time the guards are talking to him, knocking on the cell doors, berating him, verbally, things like that.
There's still this psychological torture going on outside the door
And
from the guards.
Now they carry on with the other, what is it called? The other prisoners, they carry on with them, kind of normal, everything they're doing, and making them come out and chant, making them sing their songs in the hallways, that kind of stuff. But every time they would do it, they would have to say something to 416. That's his number.
Was that
was 416. To prisoner 416. So they would make him chant to 416, or they would have to speak through the door to prisoner 416 who was in the hole, kind of mocking him too.
Say they were forced to antagonize him further.
Right.
Like it was that whole thing about like, if one is going to break the rules, we're going to punish you all so that you all blame that one.
So they let him out of the hole. He goes back, does his thing in the room. And the next day comes around and everything goes kind of normally till it comes time to eat. And once again, he refuses to eat, which really sets the John Wayne off at this point.
I said they thought that they have probably broken him at that point. So when he refused to eat again, that was like insult to injury to these people.
So they pull him out. They threaten all the other inmates that, hey, this is because of 416, so this is about to happen. They put him in the hole. And then he stays in the hole for a while, and he tells the other inmates that unless 416 eats his dinner, that we're going to take your bed sheets and covers away, and that you'll have to sleep with no covers.
Yeah.
And
so they get like the bare mattress, basically, like just the bare minimum they were allowed.
So if he gives the prisoners the choice that they could all give away their bed sheets and they would let 416 out of the hole as well if they would do that. But if 416 would eat his food, then they could all get their blankets back.
They'd be rewarded, basically. You're punished if he disobeys,
Yep.
and you're rewarded if he decides to fall in line.
So they offer that option, and all but one of the prisoners, they vote to keep their blankets and leave 416 in the hole. One guy says that he will give up his blankets and everything to get 416 out, but majority rules, so they got to keep their blankets.
Outnumbered every single one except for that one.
So they got to keep their blankets in the end, but 416 had to spend the whole night in the hole.
Now, you know me, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in that situation, but I mean, to me, like isolation almost sounds appealing most days.
Yeah, but concrete floor because we're in the basement.
I'm not in that position. Like I've not had my creature comforts taken from me.
Yeah, complete darkness, concrete floor, no covers, no pillows, no nothing, in that smock with no underwear on. And you can't even stretch out all the way.
Yeah.
So
like whole different thing. So
to add insult on injury on this one, he makes everyone knock on the door of the cell of the hole, bang on it real hard and say, "Thank you, 416, for letting us keep our blankets. Thank you, 416." And then they got to go to their
and they have to actually hit the door.
So the one guy who wanted to give up his blanket so that 416 could get out, he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to knock on the door or nothing, but he finally, in his mind, he says, well, 416 knows I'm his friend and I don't really mean to do this, but so I don't get punished, I'm going to play along with it. And he winds up banging on the door and playing along, telling 416, thank you, 416.
And when you look at the archive footage of that and everything, you can actually hear it in his voice that he is not wanting to say this.
Yeah.
Like he's not wanting to do this.
Yeah, later on in interviews later, he tears up when he talks about it too. Along with one of the other guards. This actually 416 and his hunger strike, and then the way they treated him on this actually is the turning point for some of the guards and some of the prisoners too. It's kind of the eye-opening moment.
But I think it actually registered with them what is happening to them.
So he does eventually break down and eat because, I mean, he's got to have food, nourishment. He doesn't really break his hunger strike for anything the guard's done, but he does go on to eat some food afterward.
Just out of physical necessity.
Yeah. So, but the guards are still insulted. So they start ramping up the things that they make these guys do.
Just those petty little tortures. I mean,
like they started making them call each other by women's, like, not names, but pronouns, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they're just trying to, again, these are men we're talking about, very young men.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, okay, almost like Dr. Cox with JD in Scrubs, how he always called him by a girl's name. Like, it's that same demoralizing technique that is used. Like, even if you're not calling him by a woman's name, like, you are now saying that this man is no longer a man.
Yeah, and that they would actually remember, these guys are wearing a thin cotton smock with no underwear, and the smock it doesn't go far. It's like mid thigh,
about,
you know,
maybe.
depending on how tall they are,
Yeah.
way above the knee, you know. And they're making them hold hands, again, sing these silly little songs, tell each other that they love each other, making them hug each other, and it just progressively gets darker and more homoerotic,
yeah.
you know, in the nature that they was making them do these things.
I think they actually make them simulate mounting each other, to put it
They started
politely.
off making them play leapfrog.
Yeah.
And you know, the position you are in leapfrog where you're jumping over each other. Well, then it got to where they was just making them freeze in place, so that one was mounting the one in front of them.
Like I said, that's just putting it very politely, but
Yeah, they wasn't making them physically do.
But there was no, like, they weren't trying to simulate thrusting or, you know, anything like that. But
No.
it was just that especially for the person on the bottom,
Yeah.
a very humiliating thing to go through.
Now, remember, this was a 2-week study, and this homoerotic stuff that they was they had already got to this level of humiliation on day 5.
Yeah, we're not even the full 6 days in that this thing lasted.
We're not halfway there yet.
Well,
and
I mean,
no, we're
6
not
days,
halfway
like-
there of the 2 weeks, and they're
Yeah.
already to this level of what they're making these prisoners do. And I say prisoners, we're at the level of what they're making their fellow students, the people they see on campus,
Yeah.
do.
Do they probably know? Like, they may have had classes together or something. Like, they may have actually known each other in social circles.
And that was
like,
always something I thought about too, is after all this is over with, you're going to see each other on campus.
I say, how do you
separate that?
Yeah, I don't know that I could.
Right.
I genuinely don't think that I could.
Mm.
Like, you were given this authority over me, and you took it to a level that genuinely unethical, immoral. Like, this is not okay what you did. And you used that because, well, I mean, one, like John Wayne said, he was instructed to, and no one ever told him to stop. No one ever told him he went too far.
No one ever told him to slow down or bring it back.
Yeah.
They kept encouraging him to do more.
Yeah.
To keep pushing it.
He was like their golden boy as far as the guards went.
Again, like you said, they never told him in so many words to do more, but they were congratulating him, telling him he was doing such a good job, and saying, man, you know, everybody else needs to be more like him.
And to get that dopamine hit, he's going to keep doing more and more and everything to get the praise again. Like, hey, I'm doing good for this experiment. Like, they're praising me. Like, I'm just going to keep going until somebody tells me I've gone too far.
And that's an interesting thing too. Well, I'll get to him after we kind of wrap up the experiment part. Something about John Wayne, which I found interesting later on. So this was happening on it was day 6 is when the leapfrog incident and all this stuff was going on. And what had happened?
About finally the point that the people were like, this is going a little too far.
Zimbardo's, it was either 5 or 6. Zimbardo's girlfriend at the time, who winds up being his wife, had come to visit because Zimbardo was spending, he said, up to 18 hours or longer there observing what was going on. So he wasn't being around her. He wasn't being at home and stuff. In his own words, he said he was getting just deeper and deeper into this and losing sight of all life outside of it. And he was actually being affected by this too in negative ways because he was so invested in it. So his girlfriend says, hey, I'm going to come visit if that's okay. So he says yes. He lets her behind the scenes. Of course, the guards and the prisoners don't even see that she's there. They bring her in, you know.
Yeah, they never see the observers,
Yeah,
Zimbardo or his colleagues or anything like that. They never see any of them.
Yeah, they don't see the cameras or microphones or anything because they got them hidden behind these panels in the wall and stuff. So,
and they also were told that that these cameras and mics wouldn't be on all the time which we only have a very limited amount of footage from this study.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that.
But
yeah,
I mean, they never knew when the cameras were
They said
on.
that when the guards entered the hallway that the cameras would be on, but that turned out not to be true. They said that the voice recorders would always be on, but that turned out not to be true as well. But that the cameras would be on and off at random times throughout the day and night inside the cells and everything. And which I don't know if there's any, according to how many video hours there are, obviously that wasn't true either.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there should be, 6 full blocks of like 24-hour a day footage if they were recording the entire thing. And we have like a fraction of that.
Yeah. So so his girlfriend shows up to kind of just set in to spend time with him because she doesn't know exactly what's going on. And she misses him,
Well, I think she was also a psych student or
No,
something.
that was the first guy's girlfriend.
Okay.
The one who faked his.
Yeah.
That was his girlfriend. So she shows up and she's watching the monitors while all this is going on. And she says she almost gets physically sick watching it happen.
She is actually shocked by what she's watching.
She said she had to get up and leave the room, just disgusted by it to the point of being almost physically sick. She said that she was actually questioning the relationship with Phil Zimbardo because she was so shocked by it all that she didn't even recognize who he was. She says that his physical appearance and his mannerisms was so altered when she got there, she thought something was wrong with him, that she thought he was sick. And I guess in a way he was, just not physically.
Yeah.
And so she calls him out on it. She said, because he comes to her after she leaves the room. He follows her out and he's talking to her like, hey, what do you think? And she's like, this has gone way too far. What are you doing? This is crazy. You can't do that to these people.
Yeah, this is like straight up abuse.
Yes, because she sees the leapfrogging and she sees these things that's going on. So she's calling him out like, you've got to stop this. This is crazy. And now this is according to Zimbardo, is that when she leaves, he goes back in with a new set of eyes and watches the film and watching what's going on and realizes that it is going too far and that he has to shut it down. Because that's according to him, that's why they shut it down early. Is because he sees that it's
more and more extreme.
It's getting to that point.
And I mean, we didn't make it halfway through the intended duration of this experiment because it was supposed to last for 2 weeks. By day 6, they're like, we got to shut this down.
And see, that's something I should have checked on too. I wonder, it said it lasted 6 days. I wonder if they shut it down on the 6th day or if they shut it down on like the morning of day 7. I'm not clear on that.
I don't know either.
But it lasted 6 days. But again, day 1 didn't start till after 10 a.m. So we're not necessarily talking a full 24-hour day.
Maybe
it could have happened. They could have shut it down that night on the 6th day or the morning of the 6th day. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they said it lasted 6 days. And again, the things that were happening to them, pulling them out of the rooms, making them do these ridiculous things, that was happening at random times, middle of the night, 2 a.m., 2 p.m. It didn't matter.
Because the guards were in constant rotation, they were able to keep up this harassment and this abuse 24/7.
Yeah. At no point did these prisoners get a full night's sleep at all.
No.
They was always woken up at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., random times. Even during the day when they would try to sleep, they would get woken up and harassed. So they was all suffering sleep.
Yeah.
Deprivation.
Yeah. And this is why this study, I think, or this experiment was kind of so ridiculous and also so famous too, because even Zimbardo himself came out 40 years later in 2011 and said, this is absolutely unethical what we did.
Oh, yeah.
He admits it. And I mean, this man at the time, like from 1971 or 1972. Up until then, he had made the circuits. I mean, he was on the Daily Show when it was still Jon Stewart. Like, he made the rounds of like the daytime talk shows, the nighttime talk shows, the news articles. This was so widely publicized because it was basically the first psychological experiment, I think, recorded that was like this.
At this level, yeah, especially for this long of a time that was lasting this long.
But I actually have a quote from him from that the 40th anniversary interview that he did in 2011. He says, in the Stanford prison study, people were stressed day and night for 5 days, 24 hours a day. There is no question that it was a high level of stress because 5 of the boys had emotional breakdowns, the first within 36 hours. Other boys that didn't have emotional breakdowns were blindly obedient to corrupt authority by the guards and did terrible things to each other. And so it is no question that that was unethical. You can't do research where you allow people to suffer at that level.
Mm-mm.
That's from like the founder of this study himself saying how unethical this was. Because like informed consent was violated. These boys were told one thing, but then the study entailed something completely different. Like what they had actually agreed to. I mean, what they had agreed to happened, but then they went beyond that, which was not included in any of like the waivers or anything that they signed. So informed consent was massively violated in this study.
I have a problem with that statement with him because I think he only made that statement because of all the negative publicity, I guess, coming out of this thing, all the people questioning it. I think that was kind of a cover your butt kind of situation.
The way I like after like a week of watching like Zimbardo interviews and trying to get clips for the show and everything, I think he actually did recognize that yes, this is unethical.
See, I've watched a bunch of them all week too, and I take just the opposite of him. I think he's a sleazy car salesman, and that he's.
No, I mean I think he is too, absolutely. But I think he still is at least intellectually honest enough to say, yeah, what I did was unethical, but I don't care.
Maybe the I don't care part, but
I mean, he obviously didn't say I don't care, but you get that impression because he is like spending all these years defending this study.
Well, he told Dr. Phil in one of his interviews, Dr. Phil says, hey, you've been doing this a long time. He says, oh yeah, I've been creating evil for a long time.
I say he's trying to orchestrate evil in human nature, which again is just really bad science because if you're trying to determine what human nature actually is for different people, you have to observe it organically. You can't set up a situation and instruct them on how to behave.
Right. And that's exactly what he did.
Yes.
But again, that statement, it sounds good. I don't think he means the lick of it. I think he just made that statement to kind of save some sort of credibility or try to regain some sort of credibility. That's
entirely true, but because again, this was in 2011. That was the 40th anniversary. I don't know if he continued doing interviews or anything after this. So,
well, another thing that happened too, and there's some striking similarities to some of the photos and some of the videos of the Stanford prison experiment that happened at Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah, we've all seen those pictures and everything of the terrorist inmates that we held there being forced into like almost literally like the same situations. Like they were posed in homosexual ways.
A much more twisted versions.
I think that was more extreme.
Extreme versions. But yeah, I mean, very, very similar. Even the bag covering the heads.
Yeah. To depersonalize them, to take away that individuality.
All of them being nude or in a smock.
Was meant to humiliate and degrade them.
And the piling them up on each other in those homoerotic ways. Those were straight things that was beginning to happen on the Stanford experiment. But the problem is that it was, for lack of better, for the lack of being the actual words used, it was being encouraged in Stanford spirit.
Yeah.
Whereas
again, they were told to like go as far as they could without physically harming the prisoners.
And I've always thought about with Guantanamo is, were they being encouraged to try to break these prisoners as well?
I say that may be a really good case for us to look into for
because
another episode
they,
too, so
I mean, the government throws these guys under the bus, these reservists under the bus that was doing it in all these photos to save face in a way. But again, I'm wondering if they were ordered to do this to break them. Because, I mean, there's some obvious, because these guys, they would have known the Stanford prison experiment. And there's too many similarities, I think, that's too strikingly similar for it to be unrelated. I wonder if they were not encouraged to break the spirits of these prisoners.
I don't know. I'll take kind of a little bit different stance from you on that. I don't think that, at least based on the media reports, and we've known now that how the media has lied to us for decades and decades now. So grain of salt, guys. I'm not defending the media. But I think that is just something that is instinctual. Like if you want to demoralize somebody, if you want to depersonalize them, if you want to strip them of their humanity, you have to put them in these situations that are going to utterly debase them.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because in the experiment, you see them progressing to that state with the leapfrogging and the posing of the prisoners.
And again, they came by that naturally.
But I say that's a natural progression, because they wasn't told specifically to do that.
Yes.
That's just the direction they started going.
So I wonder, decided to do that themselves.
Yeah. So I wonder in Guantanamo, maybe if that was a natural way for them to demoralize, in a way to break these prisoners, and if that's something that they done on their own, or if they was kind of told to do that, because I'm kind of curious. I see the similarities
we definitely
side by side here.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, obviously, because like you said, the photos from Guantanamo Bay, side by side with some of the photos and the archive footage we have of this experiment, eerily similar.
Oh yeah.
Like the paper bag over the head, and then the bag over the head in Guantanamo, and then they're stripped to basically nothing, just kind of a threadbare cloth covering themselves at the very most, unless they were stripped down completely. Like, I mean, you see that happening. And I mean, when you really think about it, that is probably the easiest way to debase a person, to humiliate them, to strip them down to their most vulnerable state.
I would say for men and women as well, but for men especially, with the Guantanamo version, that culture and them being men like that and having female guards do that to them as well, that would very much be.
I say that is a huge deal,
big insult to them too. So,
because I mean, let's just say it honestly, like most of those prisoners and everything, those terrorists are Islamic men.
Yeah, they all were.
So women, we're not allowed to be in positions of authority. So when you get like these women guards and everything at Guantanamo, and you're making them strip down and they can't say no.
Yeah.
You're putting them in a homosexual pose, which is also a huge deal.
Yeah.
Like they literally throw people off buildings for that. This is like easily one of the worst things. I think the only thing that they would consider worse than that is maybe being actually killed by a woman.
Yeah.
Or at least a Jewish woman, because we know how they feel about the female IDF soldiers, and like one of their guys, they're not considered martyrs if they get taken out by like a female.
Yeah. Maybe something pork related would be the next step with them, you know.
My mama actually always has a really, and I'm probably going to get crap for this, but she has a really funny idea that every bullet and bomb and everything should be coated in pork fat.
Yeah, I've heard her say that.
Like, I'm sorry, that's That's genius.
But yeah, the similarities between the two of them, I think, it's got to be some sort of relation.
But I mean, it is. If it's a coincidence, it is a big coincidence.
Yeah. Because, but again, maybe the Stanford prison experiment was more
a reflection.
Yeah, and that was a kind of a natural progression, and they just both kind of run parallel because it is a natural progression.
And see, that's where I stand on that.
Yeah.
Like, because I think that, I mean, again, like the most demoralizing thing, like me as a woman, is to strip me down naked and, put me in compromising positions. That is me in my most vulnerable state. And you're exploiting that now.
Right. And I'd say...
And, like, you're even covering my face. Nothing else is covered, but my face is.
Right.
You have taken my face away, but left me completely exposed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is just a normal human instinct. If you're in that mindset to do that to somebody.
But so you're saying it from a woman's point of view, but from a man's point of view as well. That's just
it's the same thing to me.
That's just a human experience there being.
Like, it would be you in your most vulnerable state, and you're taken away from you, your identity stripped from you.
Right.
It's the same thing to me. Like, woman or man, it doesn't matter. Like, that's just.
Well,
it is one of the most exploitative things you can do to a person.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrifying in two ways because, like you're saying, the point you're coming from, and then there's also people that pay for that experience and because they want it.
Yeah, I will never understand.
No,
I'm sorry. Like, we're not kink shaming anybody here, but no.
But like I said, it's a big business for some people. We got about 10 minutes or so left, but there won't be a in memoriam.
Nobody died in this one, but I personally, what I was telling Daniel earlier, I think all 24 men in this experiment were victimized in different ways.
There was the 9 guards, and there was 10, so 19 really, because some of the other ones didn't get called in.
Yeah.
Now, there's reports of 5 that had mental breakdowns of various degrees, but the one that got sent home with the screaming is really the one that stands out.
I say that was the one that's highlighted in the movies and the documentaries, and
there was one other one that got, I think his number was 816 or 814 or something, that got sent home as well because of a mental breakdown regarding depression, but he's not spoken about really. So I don't think he was overly dramatic, I guess, because you don't really see much about him as far as interviews and things like that. But there is one other one that got sent home for mental health evaluations.
Okay. See, and that also brings up another question to me, like how many of these men were actually like long-term affected by this?
Well, again, there's an interview from National Geographic. We watched it this week and again this morning called The Stanford Prison Experiment, Unlocking the Truth. We watched it on Disney Plus because that's who owns National Geographic now. But you can find it out there. And it has got the interviews with the John Wayne guy, another guard, and 3 or 4 of the prisoners, including the screaming boy, the one that got sent home. He claims he faked it. Some of the other guards and prisoners agree with him, saying that he faked it so he could go home. And then Zimbardo swears up and down that it was real because I think he wants it to be real. But he's in this documentary too, and it's a 3-part documentary. And I say if you're at all interested in this, you really need to watch it because it's really good.
I said they actually have the prisoners and the guards like now,
sitting
together, talking about it, watching some of the footage.
Yeah, this documentary started,
and John Wayne. Remember, he actually when he's seeing all this now.
This documentary started filming in 2021 and it ends in 2023. So it's very, very recently. Dave Eldridge, I think his name is, the one that's John Wayne, is basically the star of this thing.
Yeah.
They show him a lot.
He was the guard that took charge. He was the kind of forerunner there.
He was a John Wayne guy, and you can actually see some regret in his eyes at the end of this documentary.
Like, he looked like he was about to start crying at one point. I mean, you could tell that there was actual remorse there. Like, I didn't realize at the time, I guess, what I was doing.
And some of the other, same way, there's another guard that he did get to tears just looking back on it and realizing, again, one of the guards that had knocked on the beat with his nightclub on the door when 416 was in quarantine or in the hole, that stuck with him for the rest of his life, he said. Same way with the prisoner that wanted to give up his blankets because he considered 416 a friend. He said that haunts him for the rest of his life, 50 plus years at this point. So it did have some psychological effects on everybody involved, lasting ones.
Well, I mean, I wonder too, from the prisoner side of thing, like, do they have any kind of like lingering depression or anxiety or, the sense of powerlessness? And
I'm sure
because you see some of those guards realizing, okay, we actually got so into this that they were no longer people to us.
There was the number.
And then you're sitting in front of them and you're watching it all again, all these years later.
That is something neat about this documentary is, at the end of the documentary, they have a few of the guards and a few of the prisoners back together in a simulated set that looks exactly like their prison
they
cells.
rebuilt it basically.
And they have them all get back together face to face, and for the first time in 50 years, and they can actually talk about it. It's pretty neat. But I want to say this about Dave John Wayne. It turns out that he was a student of acting. What's that called? I don't know. He was an actor in school. He studied it. He took
thespian, maybe.
He took courses in music and in acting. So he claims to be a very pacifist, laid back kind of guy, and that John Wayne character was just that. It was a character, and that he played that character in the experiment because he was told to, and that's why he continued to ramp it up. He wanted to see how far he'd push his character during this.
Dan says for the drama.
Yeah, exactly. For the drama of it. He wanted to continue to push it and take it another step forward every day just to test his acting abilities because he was in character the entire time. So that's one of the reasons.
I don't think it ever registered with him either that the prisoners were not acting. They were not instructed the same way the guards were.
So that's why he kept pushing it forward and seeing how far he could take it, is because he was in character. That he claims that's where he was getting the motivation to do that, was because he was in character. It wasn't really him. But yeah, by the end of this documentary, you see them talking together, and you can almost see it dawn on him after he's talking to these prisoners face to face that it really did have a lasting effect on a lot of these guys, and that you can
humanize them again.
You can see him actually regretting it.
Yeah,
he even says that he regrets some of the things that he done in character. And I think him being sure that he's in character is kind of a way of him dealing with what he did, because he was in character.
I think that's his coping mechanism with it too.
Mm-hmm.
Like
justification.
I think there may have been, because I mean, these are not unintelligent people. They were going to Stanford, so you had to know that at some point this is no longer an act.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're actually doing these things to other human beings. Like,
right. So, and here's the thing: we all agree, I think, that it's bad science. That it
was very unethical.
That it was unethical, sure, but it was bad science, and that it's starting to be. I guess they're debunking it now. It's becoming this new movement of people, like it used to be talked about all the time and taught in schools, where they're pulling it now in psychological classrooms and stuff like that. They no longer teach it. They no longer.
They do, because other studies have been done on this study.
They no longer teach it as a legitimate type of a science experiment. They do now. It's more of a we're going to caution you against doing it this way.
Here are the pitfalls. Here are the things you don't need to do.
Right. So it's still very it's still very much a popular study and a popular experiment, maybe for different reasons now. But I'm going to say this about it in closing. For me, is that sure, it's bad science, but that doesn't mean the results are bad. We still see the psychological results from the prisoner's point of view,
which was the entire goal of the study.
and we also get the psychological results of the guards. Yes, they were encouraged to do things to ramp it up
and instructed on certain
and
things,
instructed on what their limits were. It was the guards' choices to keep pushing it to that level.
And there were about half of the guards that did not go along with the worst aspects of this.
I wish, and I know it's hard on them, I wish it would have kept going, because I'm curious to see how far John Wayne and others and a couple others would have kept pushing it, to see if those other guards would have stepped up to stop it.
I think there's a way to probably do that if you just, like, informed consent has to be given all around. Prisoners and everything, because they were not given informed.
Well,
they could not give truly informed consent, because everything that they already agreed to was pushed beyond that without their knowledge. And they were not allowed to say, hey, we didn't sign up for this, I want out.
Right.
Like, unless it actually got to the point that they could not ignore it anymore, they were not allowed out, even though they were told that they were.
Well, yes, if we're going to redo the experiment, you'd have to do it that way. But I'm talking about just this original experiment. I wish the original experiment, the way it was going, would have kept going. Just because I want to see, I don't want to see the prisoners obviously go through any more of that, what they was going through. That's ridiculous.
Well, you can't have the experiment without that.
I'm talking about me personally. I don't want to really see that happen to them. What I am curious about is how far, like, okay, we made them play leapfrog and put them in those positions. I want to know.
He says you went into milligram territory.
I want to know what they're going to do next. Like the next day when John Wayne comes back in and he's had all night to think about what happened. I want to know what his next step is. If he escalates, which I kind of think he would, because of his character.
Well, he was also saying nobody stopped me.
I want to see what he would escalate it to, and I want to see if those other guards who are resistant to him would have played along, or if they would have tried to rein him back in. Because I'm thinking that as horrible as this sounds, I'm thinking it ended too soon. Okay.
But I say even Quintus is saying the experiment requires you to continue.
Yeah, well, that's a statement from the Milligan.
But I mean,
story.
That's where you're going. I mean, I agree with him on that. So.
Yeah, but yeah, because I mean, if you want to make it, and again, it's just my curiosity on it. I want to see a new study is fine, but that taints it. I need to see where this would have went. Am I happy that it ended? Oh yeah, for those prisoners, I'm 100% happy that it ended, because it was getting horrible and it was getting really dark. But there's part of me that wants to know, and my curious mind about human nature, what would have happened next. Because my desire would be that the guards would eventually step up to John Wayne and say, hey, we can't do this.
Right. You got to like chill out.
Right. I want to see, because we already know that one guard, the smaller guy, was already leaning that way. He was already extremely uncomfortable, because he talks about it in one of the interviews. I want to see if he would have actually started reeling them back in or not.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I want them to do anything worse to those prisoners. In fact, I want the opposite. But it bugs me that we don't know.
Right.
What would have happened. You know?
I mean, I can see that natural curiosity and everything, but I truly, because, and maybe this is just kind of the way my brain goes, because I've been a true crime junkie since I was a child, and I've seen, and I know so many things about the very, very dark side of humanity. I think one of those prisoners would have ended up dying.
It could be.
I think if they had let it go, somebody would have gotten very, very hurt.
Very much could have, or at least would have got violent against one of the guards, and then could have got hurt that way as well.
Because the prisoners, I don't think, were ever instructed that they couldn't harm anybody else.
Well, it was general across both boards that you couldn't do any physical harm, but also the prisoners were getting to the point now that what they were being done to them.
It would have been self-defense.
Oh
I
yeah,
think
in their minds, it would eventually broke, and at least one of them, I think, would have turned violent.
Yeah, it could. I think this could have gone very, very badly had
Yeah.
it been allowed to continue.
That's why
it already got very bad. But
that's why my curiosity wishes the original experiment, this Stanford prison experiment, would have continued to see what would have happened. Again, my heart of hearts, I want one of those guards to step up and say no.
Well, I think that's another question we had asked. I know we're kind of beyond our time.
We're over our 2 hours,
but for me, I can see at least what I think I would do either as a prisoner or as a guard. Like, I think as a guard, I would be that one to step up, like, hey, this is going entirely too far now.
Yeah, I think that's me too. I think that's our normal nature to say I would have stopped it before it got to that level. But would we? That's the whole point of the study. How far would the prisoners go, and how far would the guards go?
I mean, as a prisoner, I can tell you exactly how far I'd go to, like, preserve myself at this point. Yeah. Like, I know exactly how far I'd go.
And again, sitting on our couch in our lovely home with our dog sleeping at our feet, it's easy to say that.
Yeah.
That's what's intriguing about these studies, is because
I mean, you're actually in that situation.
Because I know 100% what I would do. Really? Until it happens, until you're knee deep in it, what happens? And what would you do? Now, they just brought something up here, a new study with ethical guardrails on it. That to redo this experiment, it would have to have some ethical guidelines that people would have to agree to up front and follow. But
I mean, that means the researchers and everything, like what they tell people that they're agreeing to is what they need to adhere to as well.
But that's the problem. If you have those guidelines and limitations, you're not going to get a true reaction. You're not going to get the true human reaction to this.
Maybe the better way to do this is actually to, I guess, maybe have undercover people in actual prisons.
Now, to get a true reading, to me, you would have to have people who don't know that's going on.
Well, I mean, I'm saying, like, we need to have, like, some kind of, like, psychiatrist or psychologist go undercover and everything in a prison, either as a prisoner or as a guard, and document how both sides are reacting to it, you know, how they're acting, how they're behaving in response to one another. You want to get a true reading, then yeah, the other prisoners and the other guards don't know that you're actually studying them, but you are.
Yeah, it has to be a natural blind test in some way.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see. I mean, if you're going to get a true human nature reading from it, then
you have to see how they're behaving naturally without any kind of knowledge that they're being watched in their natural state.
Right.
Like, that's the only way to really get a good gauge of that.
Right.
And even then, it's going to vary from person to person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I said, it's a shame to me personally that the experiment ended the way it did, because yes, it was ramping up. It was, I'm going to use this phrase, but I don't mean it the way it's going to sound. It was just getting good. Okay. I mean, it was really getting to that point of, okay, where do we go from here? Because this is nuts at this point. I mean, what happens next? And I think the telling of what happens next would have been very eye-opening.
Yeah.
It may have been very bad, or they could have somebody step up and say, enough of this. I hope it would have been somebody stepping up saying enough of this.
I say we want to,
but it drives me nuts.
The best of people.
But it drives me nuts that we will never know.
Yeah.
Because you can't recreate this.
No.
In the same manner.
And my closing is just some thoughts that I jotted down earlier. I said, it's clear today this method of research would not be allowed, but Zimbardo claimed that it was motivated by his genuine concern over the ethical issues surrounding prisons, compliance with authority, and the evils that humans have proven to be capable of.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's what our show is entirely about, actually, is the evils that humans commit to one another.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but I don't know. I don't think this could ever be recreated today under the same guidelines. Absolutely not.
No, I don't think so either. They could be a version of it maybe, but I don't know how it would actually play out because
I say these people know that they're being observed
Mhm.
in, so that's going to alter their behavior.
Yeah. I mean, going in knowing that you can't do certain things.
I say, I mean,
Then
at the bare minimum, you cannot like physically harm this other person.
I would like to see the role put in there, like the rule or guideline that the guards can't physically harm you unless you harm them. That way it's in their mind at least open that it is a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, that would I think be fair at least,
Mhm.
but especially if you're giving the guards pretty much free reign to do whatever they want,
Yeah.
other than actually hurt you.
Yeah, but also in the guidelines, you would have to let the prisoners have their nights. They would have to be able to sleep because that's not something that happens in prisons, is waking them up like
I say, even Zimbardo, like that quote that I read, he said, like, this was a 24/7 assault on
Mhm.
these boys.
Yep.
And you cannot ethically do that. You cannot
Mhm.
actually, like, mentally or emotionally torture someone
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
in an actual academic study.
Yeah, I think that the prison part of the title should be just removed because
Yeah.
it's not actually simulating a prison. These guys were being held captive. But
I mean, there probably are, you know, a lot of prison guards that are just abusive as hell like that. I mean,
yeah, I'm sure there's some. Yeah.
but I don't think that is the normal behavior of a prison guard
No.
in general.
I mean, you see it in Hollywood and dramatized, and you see some news sources, Guantanamo, things like that happen. And then on the flip side of it, you get people who are anti-prison or anti-authoritarian. They're going to bring up Attica. They're going to say that Attica happened because this kind of behavior from the guards is the cause of it. And that them going on strike and the violence that happened there, the proponents for Attica is going to lay all the blame on the guards and the authoritarian way that the prisons are run. They may be some proof to that. So.
I like Quintus's comment here that the Stanford kidnapping experiment doesn't have quite the same ring.
No, it may be more accurate.
Like, I don't think that, like, the people who signed up for it, if they thought that they could have been one of the kidnappees,
Yeah.
I don't think that they would have been so eager to sign up for it.
Well, it's like Rex here had mentioned too, the subject pool matters too, I think. No way I would have acted like those young men here in South Alabama. I mean, I'd never have signed up because I can think better than to do that. Those kids were mostly left coastal liberals so he's got a point.
A lot of them in that documentary talk about how, like, openly, like, anti-authoritarian they were.
Yeah.
I mean, this was like kind of the hippie age. And
yeah, so you had these guys on the Stanford, all of them, like I said, they was all anti-war because Vietnam was going on. They was anti-authoritarian. Even the prisoners were all excited to show how bad prisons were.
Yeah.
I mean, they were all all of them had kind of agreed to this agenda, maybe not in as many words, but they were up for it.
I mean, yes, they all signed up for it,
Mhm.
but what actually happened is not what they actually were told was, you know, kind of going to happen.
Yeah.
And they were, like, the prisoners especially were not told that they were not going to be permitted to leave even at night.
They were in fact told they could.
Yeah.
Well, they wasn't told they could leave at night to go home, but they was told they could leave whenever they wanted to.
And that turned out not to be true.
That was not true. So they wrote a script out for them, and then they just tossed it, and basically it turned out that they had lied to the prisoners.
Either that or that was the intent all along.
Yeah,
was to
it
give
could
them
be.
like a certain idea of what they were getting into.
And then strip it from them.
Yeah. Because again, they were trying to induce this sense of powerlessness.
That's
that
why
their lives were controlled by somebody else
Yeah.
entirely.
That's why they were arrested instead of just allowed to come in on that first day.
Yeah.
Because Zimbardo says that he had them arrested because if he would allow, they were told us to show up at a certain time that day, and they were arrested before that time. Because he said if the students had shown up and said, "Hey, I'm here for the experiment," that was them taking that first step. That was them being in power. It was their choice.
They were the ones taking control of
Yeah.
their situation. And
Yeah, it was by choice for them being there. But by Zimbardo arresting them early, he takes that choice away. And from that very moment, he lets the prisoners know that they are no longer in charge, have no power.
Yeah. And again, was not anything that they were informed of.
No, they did not know they was going to be arrested like that or brought in that way.
Yeah, I mean, all but like legally, they were actually physically arrested and booked and
fingerprinted, everything.
yeah, I mean, they basically walked them through the entire process of being arrested without actually having like legal charges filed.
Yeah. Very legitimate. I think that was the most legitimate part of the experiment, at least looking on paper. And then after that, it just started getting twisted. I think it would become bad science from the time they
I think from the time they put the blindfolds on them to bring them into the prison, it was already unethical. Because I'm sorry, you don't do that. That's not authentic. That you're not blindfolded when you're arrested and taken to a prison or a jail that you don't know where it's at.
To me, when it actually, at that point, it was even right up against the line of being unethical, and arguably it already had crossed it. But in my mind, that point where they jumped the shark into unethicalness is when he encouraged the guards to do more, to be tougher, to be meaner. That's when, to me, again, he never told them what to do.
The cruelty and the sadism
Yeah.
was instructed to the guards.
Well, they was never told what to do.
No,
but
they were
was
just
told
instructed to be more cruel,
to do more,
to take it further. What they decided to do on that was on them entirely.
In some of
But that's not natural human behavior then at that point.
There is in the archives that's written down, there is a list of things that they could do, suggestions like the sit-ups and the push-ups and the jumping jacks and that kind of stuff was suggested to them. But the rest of it was not. I mean, that was them just the guards escalating on their own.
Yeah, them choosing the punishments and that they were going to dish out. But
so even though it's kind of deemed bad science at this point, and it's starting to be discredited into universities, and the way it's taught is starting to flip. To be honest, to me, the results of it are still genuine results as far as seeing what human behavior does.
Well, I think
especially
when you start telling these people to make it worse, that's no longer genuine behavior.
It's
Their
genuine.
choices were organic. They decided
that's where I was headed on.
But would they have actually done that because that's their disposition? That's where the bad science comes in.
That's what I'm saying.
That's absolutely.
I'm not justifying the bad science of it. All I'm saying that that you can learn from this, because the guards with just a little bit of verbal encouragement went there. Now, the guards also thought they were part of the
experiment.
That they were.
I mean, they were a different part of the experiment. They didn't know they were
thought
being
they
studied
were
too. They thought they were just there to induce the behavior in the prisoners.
Yeah, facilitating the experiment. They didn't know that they were being studied as well.
Yeah.
So that right there is taint number one. I mean, as far as messing it up, and so now you can't say it's good science on any level, but the results of it are still something worthy to be studied. Is what I'm trying to get at.
And that's why we do have all the documentaries. We have movies. Countless studies in the psychology world have been done on this study
Mm.
So, I mean, we are learning all the time, like more and more about human psychology from this. But again, the way they went about it was just really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it was flawed, and it's sad, honestly, that it was flawed to me, because it could have been so good. And again, even after everything, even after it went so far south, there's a part of me that wishes it would have continued, just to see what would have happened next.
I say just your curiosity there.
But alas, we won't get that, because I don't think we can recreate it,
No.
not in a genuine way.
No.
So,
I mean, that wasn't genuine either for a study, but.
So what we are going to do, because we had a lot of fun with this episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. We will later on touch on the milligram study.
Yeah, that one.
Because that's one of my favorites as well. And but that'll be later on. I don't know when exactly, but we will touch on that.
I'm going to be taking y'all's listener suggestions too about future episodes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If you'll go to Front Porch Forensics on X, or Bump Stock Barbie or Bump Stock Ken on X, you can send us messages, whatever you want to do, about some of the things that y'all would like to hear. Some, whether it be a study or an experiment, psychological is what we would prefer, I guess.
I said that's always been my focus in this arena. So.
But it can be, if you want to hear something about serial killer, if you want to hear something about a murder,
anything true crime related,
crime related. If you got your favorites, H.H. Holmes or whoever it may be.
That's yours. I think he's like hinting that somebody needs to suggest that.
Yeah. But like I said, we want to get our audience and our friends and our family on KLRN radio involved in Front Porch Forensics, because we may host this show, but we want this to be your show too. So please,
that's why we love this live chat and everything, and seeing y'all's comments and engaging with them too. Like,
yeah, KLRN Radio has a plethora of shows, so you can find something that you're interested in. On
oh my God, it runs the gamut from like aliens to mental health issues to like cultural things. Like,
I mean, you got shows about anything that you can think of, you'll find something.
Oh yeah.
Not just politics either, which is nice. I mean,
it gives us a little break.
But just find something. Go to klrnradio.com. Look at the list of shows. I'm sure you'll find something you'll love. I want to thank y'all for sure for joining us. We love having you. We look forward to these shows and engaging with you guys. And again, go to X pages. Front Porch Forensics.
Friends on Facebook.
FP_Forensics. On X, it's Bump Stock Barbie or Bump Stock Ken. Send us a message with things you want to hear in upcoming shows.
And if you're friends with us on Facebook too, just like leave us a comment, because I'll post it there too. But I know our Facebooks are private for security reasons.
Yeah, we have a lot of family that listens and friends on Facebook that listen too. So y'all call us, text us, whatever. Y'all know on Facebook.
Y'all can always reach us. And yeah, I'm actually looking forward to see what suggestions everybody comes up with. So,
and in the background, as always, is producer Rick, and he's been putting the clips up for us and all that stuff. And he's the general manager of KLRN Radio, and we want to thank him again for opportunities and always being here for us and
making it run smoothly and
making
us look good.
Oh no, Senor Rick, no here. He leave.
But yeah, I think that's okay. We'll just kind of end our show on that kind of note. I know we ran over a little bit, but it's
that's one of my most fascinating psychological studies out there for me. So I got a little enthusiastic with it.
And it's been our first show back. We kind of went a little long too.
So my parting shot to the audience, guys, I'm just gonna say this now. Find you a woman that looks at Ken the way Bumpstock Barbie looks at Ken.
I treat this podcast like it's just kind of a conversation with him because we do this regularly. Like he's gotten into true crime stuff just by osmosis over the last 10 years or so. And like, it's a conversation. It's how I feel most natural and most comfortable. So instead of focusing on my camera, I just look at him and we just talk about it. So
yeah.
That's why we say just come. If it wasn't like all snowy and icy outside, we could be out on the front porch.
Yeah.
But
yeah, this is your version of pulling up a chair and joining us.
Yeah.
So, but that's what we want it to be. Just a
very comfortable, casual talk about very, very dark things.
Exactly.
Getting stabby on Saturday.
So, but thank you all again for joining us. Go to klrn.com radio. Find the show on there, and we'll see y'all in 2 weeks. Love y'all.
At night, I like the girl talk. It makes me feel alright.